Okay, Dr. O, you may start.
Okay, thank you so very much, Mrs. Sung Kim, Director of NKS, and Jeannie Sim, Assistant Director. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts, my learning experiences on incorporating Korean culture into curriculum. I'm a retired principal with LA Unify, but I have a special affinity and passion for promoting culture into our curriculum. Next slide, Jeannie, please.
All right, we're going to start sharing slide now.
Oh, okay.
All right, thumbs up, please, if you see the slide.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I do. Thank you.
Great. So next slide, please.
Oh, I love quotes, and I think I have about two quotes. The first one is culture is to humans as water is to fish. And the next quote, next slide, is people without history, past, and culture are like trees without roots. We don't, I mean, if this was a really in-person conference, I will have you divide up in small groups and discuss with your partner what these quotes mean to you, but we'll skip that. Next slide, please. I learned from ACFEL, American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages, that every time we teach language or culture, that we have to have a 5 C's in mind. Of course, one of them is culture. So communication, culture, connection, comparison, and community. I'll be addressing culture out of the 5 C's by ACFEL. Next slide, please. Oh, so many different people, historians, sociologists, anthropologists, and educators have defined what culture is, numerous definitions. But out of all those definitions, I kind of like Dr. Goodenough's definition, which is very old. Sometimes all these are goodies. In 1981, I know some of you teachers, participants, weren't even born in 1981. Can we sort of read this together? Read this definition together? Let's do choral reading. Let's read together. Ready, go. Culture
may
may
be
be
defined
defined
as the
as
shared
the shared beliefs, values,
use
and
and
rule
will
governed
govern patterns
patterns
of
of
behavior
behavior that
that
define
define a
a
group
group
and are
and are
required for
required for
membership.
group membership. Thank you. Next slide, please. Let's read this one too. Let's read it together. We'll do choral reading. Ready, go. The content
of
of
culture
culture may be
and
categorized into various
various components,
Components including
including family
structure,
structure,
life cycle,
life
life cycle,
cycles,
roles and
roles,
interpersonal
interpersonal
relationships,
relationships,
finance,
time
time
and
and space,
space, religion,
religion,
food,
history,
history,
tradition,
traditions,
tradition,
and
celebration.
celebrations. Thank you for joining me. The next slide, please. Oh, this is the best thing I ever learned several years ago. this professor at Yale applied for the NEH grant, National Endowment for the Humanities grant. And with that money, she was able to provide 6 weeks of summer Korean Culture and History Institute at Yale. She invited professors, educators, practitioners, curriculum writers, classroom teachers from all over the nation. And I was very fortunate to be one of them. Typically in the morning, we will hear from all these scholars, and in the afternoon, we'll get together, we'll come up with curriculum modules in K-12. One of the best learning about culture I have ever experienced. I know it's been years, but I keep talking about that. In that Summer Institute, we learned the following. They told us that there are about 4 different levels of culture. One is ideational level, ideal level of culture. Let's read the ones in bullets. Ready, go. Language, let it go. Ideal level of culture, what are they? Let's read it together. Language, literature, performing arts, music, arts, religion, and philosophy. So when you introduce one's culture, whether it's a Korean, Mexican, Armenian, we got to keep in mind that there are 4 different levels. Number 2 is social, structural level of culture. What are they? Let's read those subtitles together. Ready, go.
Family life,
life
cycle celebrations,
relations, holidays, festivals, education, political organizations, history, economy, recreation, interpersonal relationships. Yeah, thank you. Number 3, material and concrete level of culture. We are very familiar with that. It's about food and shelter and clothing. And every time we are asked to introduce culture, we tend to introduce food and shelter and clothing. But we learned that we shouldn't stop at this. I know we got to begin somewhere, but we begin in number 3, and then we move on to cover other levels. Number 4, ecological level of culture, natural level. Let's read the bullet. Ready, go. Use of natural resources, attitude towards nature, and environment. So what are the 4 levels of culture? Let's read the 4 levels. Ready, go. Number 1,
ideal level
culture.
Number 2,
social
and structural level.
of culture.
Number 3,
material
level, concrete level
of culture.
Number 4,
ecological
level. Just 4 different levels. Of course, we have a time limitations and sometimes finance constraints. So we just start with number 3. But let's just keep in mind that there are 4 different levels that we need to go in depth when we introduce culture or when we study or learn about culture. Next slide, please. These are some of the questions when we talk about one's culture. We're going to read all this together. It's after lunch, it's a siesta time, so let's all try to wake up. So number 1, let's read together. Ready, go.
What are the
rights and responsibilities for each family member? If you're the oldest child, you must do this. You must set a good example for your siblings, things like that. Number 2, what
What is the
is the
hierarchy
hierarchy
of
of
authority?
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 Although that's changing too. Number 3, what
What
are
are
the
the
criteria
criteria
for
for
defining
defining
stages,
stages,
periods,
periods,
or
or
transitions
transitions in
in
life?
in
life?
life?
Next slide, please. Number 4, what rights, let's read together, please. What
What
rites of passage
passage
accompany
accompany
these
these
stages?
stages?
Number 5, how
How important
is
punctuality?
punctuality? There's such a thing called Korean time. You know, but things are getting better though. They never start on time. Number,
How
we all have our own different time, I guess. Number 6, how much space
people
per
accustomed
accustomed
to.
to.
Of course, with this coronavirus pandemic, we got to practice social distancing. But before that, you know, my space is your space kind of thing. There's no such thing called personal space, although, again, that's also changing too. Next slide, please. Oh, now I'm getting to the nitty-gritty or the practical suggested activities of introducing Korean culture into your curriculum, whatever level you teach, whatever subject you teach. Number 1, it's always good to compare and contrast so students can think about similarities and differences. For instance, you look at the Korean flag, you look at the American flag, and we can discuss similarities and differences. Number 2, Korean proverbs and American sayings. I have the real examples in my next slides. Korean poems and American or British poems. Korean independence movement versus American Declaration of Independence. And then comparative history, the historical timeline. Next slide, please. Everybody knows Venn diagram if you are educators. So you talk about differences and similarities, and I'm not going to go over that. Next one. If you're an elementary school teacher, I'm sure you're familiar with this double bubble map. Same idea as the Venn diagram. For instance, if you're going to compare Chuseok, Korean Thanksgiving, versus American Thanksgiving, you will write down the similarities in the mid at the center, and then you will write down the differences outside. And I don't know, LA Unified, we're big on thinking maps. I don't know about other school districts or other state. To me, it really helps process your thoughts. Next slide, please. Oh, here goes Korean sayings and American sayings. In America, we say, the grass is, oh, let me do Korean and you do the American part, okay? Someone else's rice cake always looks bigger. The American counterpart will be, you read American part, ready, go.
The grass
Is always
is
greener
always greener on
on
the
the
other
other
side of the fence.
Right. The Korean side. Speaking of the tiger, American side, you go.
Speaking of
Speaking of the devil,
Korean saying, there will be a way to escape even if the sky falls. American version.
there is light at the
light
end of the
at the
tunnel.
end of the tunnel.
Okay. The Korean side. Past summon anyone, dust will fly. American.
There is a skeleton in everyone's closet.
The Korean. Eat both pheasant and egg. American side.
You can have your cake and eat it
You
too.
can eat it too.
Or
Kill
you can
two
kill
kill
two
birds
birds
with
with one
one
stone.
birds with one stone. Yeah. Okay. By no means these are extensive. There are a lot more. In fact, a friend of mine wrote a book on. He's an English-speaking guy who learned Korean as a second language, and he wrote a book on Korean sayings or proverbs. Next, his name is Dan Holt, if Holt, if you want to look for his book. Next. This is one of my favorite poems, Yi Sang-hwa. It's about poem of oppression during the Japanese colonial rule. And then when I introduced this, I compare with Langston Hughes' poem, because it's about poem. The sentiment is about resistance or oppression. So that's we don't have time. I'm almost running out of time. We don't have time, so we're just next slide. Next slide, please. Hello. Hi, Jeannie Shim.
Oh, I think this is the next slide.
Oh,
Okay.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, Let America Be America Again. I'm sure you're all familiar with that by Langston Hughes. And then I had students to compare and contrast these two poems of oppression and or racial discrimination and so forth. And they had pretty good discussion. Next. Next slide, please. Thank you. Kim So-won's love poem versus love poem by Elizabeth Browning. Of course, she's a British poet. And I did this with college students one time at UC Berkeley. They invited me to, on the same topic to speak. And it was very interesting to hear feedback from college students, what these poems represent and signify. Next. Flow map is sequencing of events, historical timeline or sequence. I actually deleted my slide on this because mine is so old. I really need to upgrade that, and I'm sorry I didn't have time, but next time I promise that I'll have that. If you would email me, I'll be glad to share. It's a work in progress. Next. Oh, I do have time. Okay. So these are some of the suggested activities. Of course, don't limit yourself to these suggested activities. And out of some of the suggested activities, can you consider or select one activity that you would like to incorporate in your own class? And so think, pair, share. Think about that activity and just pair and share with each other. Would they be able to share with each other, Jeannie Sim?
Yeah, would you like for them to share by speaking?
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be nice.
Then,
Yeah, just
sure, if you'd like to share, have your camera on if possible, and then please share your thoughts. We do have until the next lecture starts at 3:10.
Oh, okay. I was rushing. Okay, so I have time. I have time for sharing. I also have time for any questions they might have. Huh?
Sure, we can do that too.
Sort of. Yeah. Okay. We'll see. So I want our participants to share Oh, don't forget to take a picture of the participants, Jenny.
Yes, already done.
Oh, thank you. I want participants to think, compare, and share one activity that they might actually utilize in their own class.
So once again, we're inviting anyone who would like to share their thoughts to unmute, and please introduce yourself.
I'm thinking about doing a cross-cultural unit. I teach world literature, so I know that my task is to come up with a unit that incorporates poems from around the world. So I'm thinking about doing a thematic unit. We did one last year that was very good about poems of oppression, and so we talked about Japanese internment poems. We talked about poems that came out of the Holocaust, out of the Russian Gulag system. And I realized I can do something very similar around different ideas as well, like love poems and things like that. Thank you.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you. You even had a unit on poems of oppression around the world. Well,
yes.
They go right into your lesson. Thank you for sharing. And the grade level, or?
I teach upper school 9th grade.
Oh,
world
okay.
literature and world history.
Actually, I've tried some of these activities at all levels. Upper elementary, middle school, high school. I even talked to college students about this. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts, participants?
Hi, my name is Josephine Pekovsky. I am a Defense Language Institute instructor here at Ulsan Air Force Base in South Korea.
Wow.
I really enjoyed Dr. Oh's presentation regarding the poems and differences, showing the Venn diagrams, showing the similarities and differences between Korean culture and American culture aspect of teaching. My level of students are both intermediate as well and advanced courses students who actually graduated from Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. So I really like the idea of the way you approach for students to think higher level, some sort where they are not necessarily just imparting the knowledge of Korean culture, Korean history or Korean culture only, but for them to understand from L1 side aspect of Korean learning as well, where how they can see the similarities and the differences in both Korean and American English. So I took actually some of the pictures that you showed in your presentations, where I can kind of get an idea of how to incorporate that into my classroom instructions. So I thank you very much. It's like I've been up since 4:30 this morning, so I'm still half drunk with sleep, but I'm trying to be attentive somewhat. And I took a leave for this week in order for me to attend these 3 days of your presentations. This is my first time, so I am not so much familiar with the protocol, how you do this, but I am very thankful and excited about this opportunity for me to be able to see 3 hours of presentations from Dr. Kim, Dr. Oh, and even Dr. Park this morning about Korean immigration history, where I didn't find, I didn't actually teach any part of Korean immigration history at all in my class, but I am considering to incorporate that into my teaching for my next iteration, which starts actually on the 7th of July. So thank you very much. I am learning a lot from all presenters from each aspect of Korean teaching. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for saying that. One of my former teachers at Third Street School in LA Unified, when I was a principal there, she's now assistant principal in Korea at Department of Defense schools, Hannah Lim. I don't know whether you.
I've been here almost 2 years now.
Oh.
I am actually U.S. Navy officer veteran, as well as a Defense Language Institute Chinese Mandarin alumna. But I don't have that experience. I took this as my second career. So I'm still in incumbent stage, how to teach U.S. military Korean linguists at Defense Language Institute. So I do not know many people here in Korea, but if I get to know some people who actually live here in Korea and teach Korean, it would be great for me to kind of have that networking system going on, Korean teachers here in Korea. I mean, I don't but I really appreciate it a lot. I have nothing to do with the LAUSD, none whatsoever, but I am learning a lot from kind of different aspect of Korean teaching. So I am very excited. Even yesterday for straight 3 hours, I am, I'm a heritage Korean speaker as well. And having lived in America and overseas for over 32 years, coming back to Korea, teaching Korean to U.S. military linguists, it's a totally eye-opening experience to me as well. But I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm learning it a lot. So I am very, very thankful in that aspect for having this opportunity to taking this presentation via online, because it would not have been possible for me to fly to LA to begin with because of my tight schedule every year. But I am actually thankful for this pandemic where I can have this opportunity to kind of self-educate myself through this opportunity to 3 days of the Korean culture as well as Korean history.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Very interesting. If you don't mind emailing your email address to me, I will see if I can connect you to Hannah Lim, who's in Korea, who's assistant principal in Korea.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you very much.
Yes, and in fact, I'm supposed to be in Korea this summer, training principals there, but again, because of this coronavirus pandemic, and I'm doing it online, and guess who helped me with that? Jeannie Shim.
Please drop me a line, Dr. Oh, if you get to come to Korea this summer. I am here actually in Osan, Korea.
Yeah.
Only 10 minutes away from U.S. Air Force Base. So
yeah, but I wouldn't be going there this summer.
Oh, okay.
Jeannie, I don't think we have time for questions. May we go back to my screen, the last screen?
The last slide?
The last slide, rather, not screen.
Okay, Sua, are you able to bring that last slide up? I think we
While you are picking up the slides, has anybody used the folk tales from different countries?
Oh, yes.
Like a good example is Korean Cinderella versus European Cinderella. So we'll have Korean literature review in July during CISO webinar. So one of the topic is Korean literature. Folk tale is a very good subject. I found that many English teachers, not only in the grade school, but also high school and college teachers, they love to talk about this as a comparative analysis of the literature. So we'll have more discussion in July.
Yes, amen to that. You'll be delighted to hear one of my teachers at my former school did Cinderella from 16 different countries, and then he has students, compare and contrast. Of course, I'm big on literature. It's just that I usually spend 1 or 2 hours for my presentation, but because of this is a Zoom meeting, they told me I only have half an hour, so I kind of rushed through that.
So
sure,
we
thank
do,
you for
we do
Thank you
writing
for-
competitions, Sejong writing competitions. So one of the topic for 8th grade and younger is reading the folk tale and write essays about the folk tales. So I
Could
will
you-
talk more about that at the
Yeah,
Sejong webinar
could you
in
do me a
July.
favor? Could you email me that info to my email address on my slide?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your.
Sure. Thank you for reminding us. The last slide I gave, the next slide.
This is the last slide. Would you like the previous slide?
Was it previous or the last? The last
This is-
slide, I introduced Mary Connor's book, but people already know about that, right? Okay, then. Well, if you have further questions or this is really sweet and short, half an hour, I love to talk. You know, I'm a typical teacher and a principal, and it's kind of very tough for me to limit myself into half an hour, but I enjoyed it. And if you have more comments or something that I need to learn or expand my horizon, please do email me. I'm an email queen. Thank you so much, Mrs. Sun Kim and Jeannie Shim, for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Okay,
Thank you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you,
Dr. Oh. 감사합니다.
감사합니다.
또 next